Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our Prevent Breast Cancer update sessions. It's been quite a while, hasn't it, since we've done one of these, or certainly that I have, and I'm just absolutely thrilled that you can join us. And what a pleasure. By the way, when you see the man sitting beside me now, do not panic, we're suitably distanced, but it is a great pleasure to have beside with me, at long last through this COVID times, our chairman, Lester Barr. Normally, when we'd be doing these things through these COVID times, I would be in one room speaking into the little camera in the laptop, and he would be in another room speaking into it, and that's how we do our interviews. But happily, here we are together, as I say, suitably distanced, so don't panic. We are here tonight, and in this situation, thanks to the splendid generosity of Keytech Presentations Limited in Broadheath, who provided with this magnificent green screen it is, because that's what it is to us. You see the pictures, we just see a green screen. 1, 2, 3 cameras all pointing to us. So it's a huge thank you to Keytech, who've given us all this free of charge. Now, as you, I'm sure, are aware, this is the anniversary of 25 years of Prevent Breast Cancer all through this year. And tonight I'm going to be getting Lester, our chairman here and co-founder, to take us through the charity's considerable milestones and achievements in that time, and to update us all on what is actually happening now. So it's a big welcome to you, Lester.
Thank you, Gordon.
And I think we actually talked properly in an interview situation, albeit in different rooms, about a year ago. Talked to others in the meantime,
Yes.
But for you, and so this is great that we can look each other in the eyeball. A lot's changed since we last spoke a year ago, and changed for the better. One thing that has definitely changed for the better, that it's not just welcome breast cancer surgeon and chairman of Prevent Breast Cancer, Lester Barr. It's welcome chairman of Prevent Breast Cancer, Lester Barr, MBE. You've recently had that honour awarded to you. We're all thrilled, and it must have been a big thrill to you when you heard about it.
It is a big thrill, yes. But for me, it's not about me personally. It really is about the team. Because what we've done is thanks to the amazing clinical team I'm part of, the amazing fundraising team of Prevent Breast Cancer, and the amazing research team behind Prevent Breast Cancer, with such great ideas and passion and innovation, and really it's that lot that have, I'm at the pinnacle, as it were, of that big pyramid of people, and so yes, I'm pleased for that reason.
Well, as always, you're unbelievably modest, because you put such a huge personal effort and personal time into all this that it was extremely well deserved. And we're actually going to talk about it in more detail, much as you'll hate doing that, but we're going to do it in more detail towards the end of the program, because I'm fascinated to know what the process is. Okay. What happens when the letter arrives, and you haven't actually had the MB presented to you yet, so I want to know when that's going to happen, who's going to present it, where it's going to happen, anything that you can tell us about that, and we look forward to that a little bit later. The other thing that's happened for the best since we last talked is this high percentage of people who have now been double jabbed. I think the figure is just about to hit 80% of people who have had 2 jabs, and now there are quite a few people, particularly for me, the older generation, that are getting the booster jab, the 3rd jab, which in fact I had 3 weeks ago. So what has that meant, along with the lifting of a lot of the restrictions that were there when we talked before? What has that meant for Prevent Breast Cancer patients and people who felt they have symptoms but didn't want to go anywhere, didn't want to go out of the house? What's it meant?
Well, it means the good news that breast cancer clinics are back up and running at pretty well at full speed up and down the country. And the breast screening program is back running more or less at full speed, although there are continuing staff shortages, and so there's still a backlog to catch up on. But it does mean that women with a breast symptom, with a breast lump, with a worry, can indeed come to a breast clinic, and the staff are all jabbed, the patients are generally all jabbed, and it's a much safer environment.
It's this backlog that built up through COVID, and in fact, the times after COVID, when people were still too worried to go out to places like hospital, that worries me, because there was quite a big backlog there. But how significant have we made inroads into that backlog?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things to say. One is that if we think about the breast screening program, which is women between 50 and 70, a recent report from Breast Cancer Now reckons that over 1 million women missed their appointments because of the COVID restrictions. And those women have not been lost, as it were. They are still they're now back in the pipeline again, and the screening program is calling them to come and have their screening mammograms. The take-up rate is still lower than it used to be before COVID. So I think what that tells us is that women do still have some reluctance to come forward just for a routine check. For women who've not had their breast cancers diagnosed during this last year, and there are several thousand of them, we think, here in the UK, again, we believe that we're now beginning to draw them into the breast clinics, and partly through screening and partly through coming to the clinics. But that is a worry, because one of the key components to surviving breast cancer, being cured of breast cancer, is early diagnosis. And so that is a continuing concern.
And because so many people have missed the early diagnosis through the lockdown and thereafter. So that is a huge concern, which I want to raise with you now. But let's just remind ourselves of the official breast cancer statistics that we usually show you when we're doing these programs. They're up on the screen now. There they are. 1 in 9 women will get breast cancer in their lifetime. 11,547 died from the disease last year. It's the biggest cause of death for women aged 35 to 49. And breast cancer rates in women have increased by 22% over the last 30 years. And here's one of the key ones we've just been talking about. 1 in 10 breast cancers are diagnosed late. Now, those are the figures really before COVID. So I have to put it to you, Lester, that those figures, which are pretty high really, and the whole process of what we do as charities and everybody else is to get those figures right down. In fact, because so many people miss their early diagnosis, the stark fact is, I presume, that those figures are going to go up before they come down.
I think what we're going to see, Gordon, is that we will see a dip in the number of breast cancers diagnosed because of COVID. And in 4 or 5 years' time, that will translate into a small bump in the number of breast cancer deaths. But those of us who are working in the field of breast cancer, we are hoping to keep that little bump as small as we possibly can. And that's why this catch-up period is so important. If I can elaborate on that a little bit, some of the missed breast cancer diagnosis, about 10% of them will in fact be very, very early pre-cancer changes called DCIS. And if they are missed for a year or even 2 years, it probably won't make any difference. We can still cure them. At the other end of that spectrum, maybe about 10% of them will be small, early, what's called a triple negative breast cancer, which they're much harder to treat. And these are the ones that you really want to catch early by screening. And I think there is a danger that those lost opportunities to diagnose the small triple negative breast cancers, that's going to cause a bump and an increase in the number of women dying of breast cancer in a few years' time. But we will certainly do everything that we can to minimize that by diagnosing them when they come forward 6 months, a year, etc. later, treating them to our best of our ability, and hopefully we can minimize the bump so that it doesn't correspond to the big dip that we will definitely see this year.
Yeah. And as you said, early diagnosis is everything, and I don't want to lose that point you made earlier, that the facts and figures show at the minute that there are still some people reluctant to come forward when they should do. So just tell us, in terms of reassurance for those people, their worry will be to come to a place like the Nightingale Centre or the Christie or whatever, where there's a lot of people in there, close-ish together, etc., and they'll be worried. So tell them why they shouldn't be worried.
Well, if you go to a supermarket nowadays, most people are not wearing a mask, in my experience. But if you go to the hospital, we're all wearing masks, we're all gelling all the time, washing our hands all the time. I really don't think it's possible to catch COVID at the hospital now. It might have been back in the beginning, but the precautions are in place now, and a hospital environment is a much, much safer place than it used to be, particularly if you're coming for outpatient tests. And so I would say, yes, please come to hospital if you have a breast symptom. The breast clinic is a safe place to come, and we want to see you and diagnose you quickly, because that gives you the very best chance of A, less treatment, and B, a much surer outcome and prognosis.
And you mentioned earlier in this chat about breast screening appointments. So just to drive this point home more, are people still eligible within the various age groups still to get that without any delay now? They'll be able to come as they used to do whenever their appointment arrived, or are there still delays for that?
In most of the country, it's back up and running in the normal way, and that's for women between 50 and 70. Once you're over 70, you no longer receive an automatic invitation letter, but you're still allowed to have a mammogram, but you have to then contact the centre and ask to be included in the next round.
Good. Well, that's a good update of everything that's happening now, which is pretty positive. What I want to do now is to consider the 25 years Prevent Breast Cancer has been in existence, and how far it has come in that time, because it's come quite a long way. The brilliant research programs that the charity has financed, the buildings that have gone up that we've raised large amount of money for, like the Nightingale Centre, and there's a new addition going to be added to the Nightingale Centre called the National Breast Imaging Academy, which is a very exciting thing, and we'll talk about it later in more detail, but the quite considerable milestones we've achieved in the 25 years, so I want to have a fairly brisk skip through it, if that's even possible. And when the charity launched back in 1996, it was not Prevent Breast Cancer then, it was of course called Genesis. You see the old logo there, that will give you happy memories. So what were your thoughts at the time when you decided, you had this idea that you had to launch this charity? What was it that drove you to have it, and what did Genesis concentrate on at that stage?
Well, to answer that question, you have to picture me 30 years ago as a young breast cancer specialist surgeon working in a breast clinic. There's a knock on the door. The nurse says, "I've got Mrs. So-and-so here. Her tests, I'm afraid, show that she's got breast cancer. Could you see her and guide her through her treatment?" So yeah, I talk to her, book her in for a surgery, give her a date, explain that once she's had her surgery with me, she'll go on to see a nice doctor, Dr. Howell, for chemotherapy. And then once she's had her chemotherapy, she'll then go on and see another doctor, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Misra, for radiotherapy. And no longer I've just finished that conversation with her, and there's another knock on the door. And the nurse says, "Oh, I've got another patient for you. I'm afraid her tests show she's got breast cancer. Would you see her?" Of course. Book her in for surgery, same little talk, me first, then maybe chemo, then radiotherapy. Knock on the door. "Mr. Barr, I've got another patient for you." And it felt like I was on a conveyor belt in a factory treating women with breast cancer. And yes, we were doing our very best to make that conveyor belt the highest quality, the best treatment we could, with as much care and attention, etc., on that conveyor belt. But it occurred to me, hang on, we've got to do something to stop this conveyor belt. I can't just continually do this for the rest of my life and not do something to try and stop women joining the conveyor belt at the very beginning. And at that time, nobody was talking about prevention. I think the total amount of research money invested in prevention was about 2%. 98% was invested in trying to make the conveyor belt bigger. And so the idea was, well, hang on, we've got to do something. It was an idea, as it were, at the beginning, and then it became a vision. Let's try and stop this breast cancer conveyor belt at the start through early diagnosis, but preferably through prevention.
Mm. But fine, it's one thing to say this is what we need to do, and we're going to launch this charity to try and achieve that. It's another thing to actually get it up, get it running, and for it to get a following, and a big enough following then to raise the sort of money you needed to tackle the problem and to tackle all the research. I mean, how tricky was that?
I think it was possibly the beginning of a general mood change or a culture change that we tapped into, that prevention is better than cure. And also we'd spent the last 3 or 4 decades researching cures for cancer, and there never was a final bullet. That final cure that we've been waiting for wasn't coming along. And so, oh, hang on, let's actually look at the other end of that conveyor belt. Let's turn our focus to trying to stop it in the first place.
10 years, you built the charity.
Yep.
It grew, it grew, it grew. I was involved from the early days, so I could see it happening. And it got to a stage where there was a major step forward in the 10th year, which was the building and opening of the hugely impressive Nightingale Centre right there beside Wythenshawe Hospital. So how much fundraising went into achieving it, and why did you think it was absolutely essential to have a building like the Nightingale Centre?
Well, we needed to have a new state-of-the-art diagnostic centre in Manchester. And at the same time, there was this growing vision that as part of a diagnostic centre, why don't we try and have a prevention centre as well? Let's marry these two things together, prevention and diagnosis in the same building. And that was quite unique. We called it Europe's first breast cancer prevention centre. I think actually it was a world first, but we didn't want to be sued by somebody in the United States, so we called it Europe's first. And the other reason it was so significant is that it was a collaboration between the NHS and a charitable organisation. So we came alongside the NHS, and through years of blood, sweat and tears and negotiation, we eventually managed to raise the money to build our centre in Manchester, combining a prevention centre with a diagnostic centre, which is quite unique and has been such an important resource ever since.
So up went the building, and I remember having the honour of comparing the official opening ceremony.
You did.
In fact, we've got some pictures there. In fact, the top row left to right there is earlier than that. That's when the first sod was cut, I think it is, across the top. But there at the bottom there, you can see the day we officially opened it. And as you can see from that, a bit like tonight, it was heavy rain. But it broke up every so often, and we managed to get through it. Everybody encircled the building, if you remember, with a big pink ribbon, and they're all got scissors in their hands, and they cut the ribbon on the countdown to 0, and there we were, officially opened. And what went through your mind at that time? Because this was your dream, to have this place up there and built, and here was the moment. It was now officially open, and business was open.
Well, first of all, a sense of relief after all those years of heartache. Secondly, a real sense of pride. We didn't get a special celebrity to cut the ribbon, sorry Gordon, but we got everybody there. We had about 100 pairs of scissors, and at the end of the countdown, 100 scissors cut that ribbon. So there's a real sense of community involvement and engagement, and that was lovely. And then, as you mentioned, it started to rain, and then it rained more, and my heart sank. And then we had the most torrential downpour of rain that I've ever seen. Absolutely awful. And so, oh, that was terrible. I thought, oh no, this has really ruined it. Until somebody in the audience or in the group outside the building said, actually, this rain from heaven, it's a sign of blessing. It's blessings from heaven on you. And that cheered me up enormously. Oh. So whoever it was that said that to me, thank you very much. that really changed my idea about this awful rain.
That's great, and I'm sure inside you're absolutely thrilled to bits that this dream of yours had suddenly become a reality. And it is, in fact, now soon to have an extension added to it, which we will come to shortly because I want to get the very latest news on that. But just to complete our history, the charity was still called Genesis at that time, but 9 years after that, 2016, came this. It was actually a huge decision that you made when you decided to totally rebrand, including changing the name of the charity. And in fact, at that time, when you changed the name, made a launch video of what had been achieved through Genesis, and then the change we will see, the logo change into Prevent Breast Cancer. And I just thought it might be interesting and fun to remind people of that launch when Genesis changed to Prevent Breast Cancer.
It all started with my vision to prevent breast cancer.
So we created Genesis.
We built Europe's first prevention centre.
And we now fund groundbreaking research.
We wouldn't be where we are today without you, our supporters.
Faces have become friends.
And it's these friends that have become our family.
But unfortunately, our work is not yet done.
Too many people are still being diagnosed.
Our mothers, our sisters.
Our daughters, our grandchildren.
And men can get breast cancer too.
It's not okay. It shouldn't be this way.
Together, let's keep fighting.
To protect our future generations.
Together, we can achieve our vision.
A world without breast cancer.
We've come so far.
Join us and be part of our future.
We are.
We are. We are.
We are.
We are.
Prevent Breast Cancer!
The promise is in our name.
Terrific stuff. The changeover to prevent breast cancer, and this is huge because it so often doesn't work. I worked on BBC Northwest Tonight. 30 years earlier, it was Look North. All the years I did it, it was still Look North to everybody, not Northwest Tonight. Yes. The Manchester Arena, most people remember it as the MEN Arena. Don't know whether you know this or not, it's actually the AO Arena now. There have been several changes in between. And that's the danger of changing your name. Have you any regrets?
None at all. It's been a big success. One of the problems of many charities, particularly cancer charities, is that their main support base is our generation, the over 50s. But what we really wanted to do with the new image and the new logo was to connect with the younger age group and connect with Twitter and Instagram and the sort of millennial generation. And so that change of name really helped because it says on the tin what it is we do, and it makes it much easier, I think, to advertise and to explain what we do because the name explains it. I love that little video that you've just shown. I'd forgotten it, not seen it for years, but there's a line in it. It's not okay. It shouldn't be this way. I think that's so powerful, and I think that is one of the drivers behind the whole team. This is not okay. We cannot go on year after year with women getting breast cancer, dying of breast cancer, going through breast cancer treatment. We have to do something to stop because this is not okay.
Too true. And just to bring us finally up through the history to present day, excuse me, one huge thing happened. Came right out of the blue. No one could have anticipated, but it had such a devastating effect on, well, all our lives. And of course, for charities, it was a total and utter disaster. Lockdown, fundraising grinding to a halt. So how badly was Prevent Breast Cancer, who relies so much on funding, how badly were we hit with that, and what were the consequences of lockdown to the charity?
Well, our funding income just fell off a cliff because so much of our fundraising, as you say, comes from community events and community groups, people getting together to run, cycle, have a coffee morning, party, ball, etc. And so one of the immediate consequences of that was that we had to shut our research pipeline. We needed to concentrate on the research that was continuing. Some of that was struggling because of staff shortages, but we had to concentrate on that, and we had to stop our research pipeline, as did Breast Cancer Now, as did UKCR, as did other major charities. All had to do the same thing. That research pipeline had to be shut. Thankfully, we've managed to hold on to our staff through the furlough schemes, through brilliant fundraising ideas that the team have come up with during lockdown. So it's not been a fatal blow to us at all. And quite the opposite. We're now in a place where we're talking about rebuilding and coming back stronger than ever. But I think it will take us at least another 6 months, and it won't be until another financial year that we financially recover from the hit that we've taken.
Yeah. Well, these research programs that we've raised money for in the past, and we're a bit hit by COVID, is really what I want to just concentrate briefly on now, because they are the centre stone of what this charity is all about, the 4 pillars of research that define Prevent Breast Cancer. And I want to look at them now, very briefly, to go through all 4 of them. There they are, our 4 pillars: gene research, early detection and screening, preventative drugs, diet and lifestyle. We want to have a look at those. I want to go through each one with you, just for your update of where we have come in the research in those areas, where we have got to, the advances we've made, if you like, and in fact where it might go after that, particularly when we can start funding even more research at the minute. So let's go to gene research, which I think has been huge for Prevent Breast Cancer. Talk to me about that, how that's developed and where we've got to.
Well, things have improved a lot since Prevent Breast Cancer began. Back in the early 90s, there were families up and down the country, and indeed across the world, where half of the women in the family were getting breast cancer in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. Some were dying of it. Families were, women were scared. Who's next? You know, it's my auntie, my sister, my cousin. Will I be next? And at the launch of Prevent Breast Cancer, that was roughly at the same time as the breast cancer genes BRCA1 and BRCA2 were discovered. And since that time, our group, in collaboration with others, we've found, we think, most of the really high-risk genes now. But more importantly, we've put into place strategies for screening, testing, and treating women who carry these genes. For some, that will mean just coming every 6 months for a checkup, and we have a program of looking after women with a breast cancer gene now. For some, it may be taking a preventative tablet. For others, it might be the right thing is preventative surgery. But now that when we're looking now at these same families, what we've discovered is that the life expectancy for women who engage with these programs is now back to normal. So 20 years ago, those families were faced with this horrible prospect that there were going to be breast cancer diagnosis and breast cancer deaths within them. But 20 years later, those families can now have what appears to be a normal life expectancy. And that really has been a dramatic shift of which our team can be very proud, I think. I think it really has made a huge difference.
Well, if, as you say, you got to the point where you virtually identified all the bad genes, you can tell what they are now. Where is there to go then with gene research?
Right, so the next step, and this is where we're going in the future, is we want to identify the genes that occur in women who don't have it in their family. And what we've discovered is that there are indeed gene fragments called SNPs, which in certain combinations can give particular women with no family history a particularly high risk of getting breast cancer at some point in their life. And so there's been a shift now in gene research away from those family history, familial breast cancer, towards, right, let's really dig down into the genes that cause breast cancer in women who don't have it in their family. And for many women, breast cancer isn't primarily genetic, but it's a combination of the interaction of their genes and their environment, and looking at their genes is an important component of that, which allows us to predict who might get breast cancer in the future.
We move on then to the second pillar of research, early detection and screening, which I've already said is absolutely vital. So where has our research taken us through that area?
Well, the last 20 years have seen a lot of technology advances. So we have 2D mammography, and we have 3D mammography, which is now digital. And the quality of mammograms now, compared to even 10 years ago, and certainly compared to 20 years ago, is very much better. So we have far fewer missed cancers and far fewer false positives. And in the olden days, we were perhaps struggling to make the screening program as efficient as it could be, but there's been such a change in the technology behind the sort of mammography, and then on top of that, diagnostic techniques and surgical techniques, that the quality of care for breast cancer and the quality of diagnostic accuracy is very much better than it used to be. Mm. So again, I would say that's been a huge change.
Where can that go to?
Right, so we are all passionate believers in the screening program, but for the next decade and the next decade after that, we want to change it. And one of the big changes we want to make is to work out ways in which we can start screening women much younger than 50, which is when the NHS screening program kicks in. And we think we've now got the technologies to do that. And so our current emphasis on research now is looking at practical ways in which we could introduce breast screening, maybe at 40, maybe at 35, maybe even younger. And this is through a combination of genetics and assessing risk factors at a young age, and then implementing what we call risk-adapted screening, or smart screening. So you don't screen every single person, but what you do is you identify those who are at high risk, and you concentrate your resources in them. And at the other end of the spectrum, there'll be some women with a really very, very low risk of getting breast cancer, and we can say, look, hang on, you don't need to be screened at all. We could leave you alone, and maybe let's see you again in 10 years. So we really want to look at screening that younger age group as the next direction to go. But in addition to that, we think we can make the screening of women between 50 and 70 much smarter as well. Currently, you have one size fits all. Every woman has a screen every 3 years. But in reality, we think that it would be much better to give an annual screen, or maybe an 18-month screen, to those at particular risk. And then those who don't really have much of a risk of getting breast cancer, we can say, don't worry, it looks like your risk is very low, and we'll simply retest you in 10 years' time. So there's a lot of excitement behind the scenes that smart screening or risk-adapted screening is where we should be heading.
Good, positive. Third of the 4 pillars, preventative drugs. As yet, we don't have one that does prevent, but where have we got to with preventative drugs?
Well, we actually have 3 drugs that prevent. Those 3 drugs have been researched partly by our group in collaboration with others. They're not 100% preventative, but they're in the sort of 40 to 50% preventative category. And we have been working behind the scenes. These drugs have now been approved by the NHS. They can be prescribed. They are suitable for women who have breast cancer in the family, who have a higher than average risk of breast cancer, because with any drug you have to weigh the side effects against the benefit. But for those who do have a high risk of breast cancer, preventative drugs can cut their risk in half. And so there are hundreds of women up and down the country now who do indeed take a preventative drug approved by NICE, the Department of Health, and available on the NHS.
So do we get to the 100% effective drug in due course? I might throw in here for a quick comment, something that made all the headlines on the national news and newspapers not long ago. I think it was AstraZeneca announced this drug that would cut deaths and prevent in breast cancer by about 50%, I think it said. I mean, was this a moment of great excitement, or where are we going?
Yes, so there's a new drug, but it illustrates a number of points. The first point is that it only works in a small percentage of breast cancers, because breast cancer is not one disease, it's many diseases. And this drug works in a particular type of breast cancer called secondary breast cancer, caused by HER2 positive breast cancer. And it's about 50% more effective than previous drugs. I think actually it's 70% more effective than previous drugs, which is great news. The second point, however, that it demonstrates is that as new treatments come along, it doesn't seem as if they're going to be, it's not like a 70% cure. What it's doing is allowing women to live for longer with their breast cancer. And this is one vision of how breast cancer might look in 20 years' time. The idea is that you live with it a bit like you live with diabetes, except you're on drugs. Mm-hmm. The vision that Prevent Breast Cancer have is quite different, which is that it's much better to try and prevent the disease from happening in the first place, rather than living your life for years and years and years on different drugs. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's wonderful to have new effective drugs that can make you live longer if you have secondary breast cancer, and obviously we're completely in support of that. But the emphasis of Prevent Breast Cancer is really, gosh, let's try and stop people having to live with it in the first place.
Okay, the final one of the pillars is risk factors, which includes diet and so on. Tell us about that, where we've advanced with that, and where it could lead to.
Well, in the last couple of decades, we've concentrated very much on the diet and lifestyle risk factors. And one of the things I've been really proud of is that Prevent Breast Cancer has funded the only dietitian and her team in the UK whose full-time job it is to research the link between breast cancer and diet and breast cancer and lifestyle. That's Michelle Harvey. And so we know for sure now that certain dietary habits are bad for breast cancer, and we know that certain interventions are good to prevent breast cancer. The 2-Day Diet book that she published was one example of that. As we now think about the future, we want to continue looking, of course, at diet and lifestyle, but we're quite interested in a broader look at risk factors. So the fourth pillar is going to be much more about other risk factors. And the way this works is that because we've learned so much about the factors that make you at risk of breast cancer, we're now able to individualize for an individual woman her personal risk. So we can work out for you, what is your lifetime risk of getting breast cancer? Based on, yes, your diet, your lifestyle, other risk factors, something called breast density, and the SNPs I mentioned earlier, and these other genes. If we put that all into the melting pot, we can now individualize prediction of risk for women. And one of the areas that's particularly exciting is this is an area called breast density. So women whose breast tissue is quite dense on a mammogram have a higher risk of breast cancer. If we give such a woman a year of tamoxifen treatment, which is one of our preventative drugs, a year later we can see that their breast density goes down. And that's a marker that their risk of breast cancer is going down. And so it looks as if we can possibly begin to look at ways at reducing risk factors for breast cancer. And this will be an important part of our research in the next 4 or 5 years, is really trying to get to grips with this whole issue of breast density and get to grips with personalized prediction.
Good. Thank you. That's perfect.
Good.
And I love the way every time I ask you, where do we go from here, you sit forward with great enthusiasm to spend the way forward. It's fascinating and inspiring. So those are the key areas of research. And obviously, we need the funding to do it. And we mentioned earlier about COVID and the funding drying up and so on, and we weren't able to commission new research in those particular areas. So very briefly, where are we with that now? When do you think we'll be in a position to have enough money coming in to start commissioning new research projects?
Well, we think that before the end of the year, we'll be able to commission some new research projects. And we think what we'll do is start off with what we call pilot projects. So we don't have the funds to fund a huge multi-year research project, but we do have sufficient funds which we don't want sitting in the bank account. We want to use them for something useful, and so we will be going out before the end of the year to ask folk for applications for pilot projects. We've got a great scientific committee as part of Prevent Breast Cancer who will sift through those ideas, choose the very best, and we have a really good track record of seed funding pilot projects or putting things just where, wow, that was a great idea and that's borne fruit.
Right. I mentioned earlier that there was this new building going to go up alongside the Nightingale Centre once the funding's been raised. So I want to get an update on where we are with that, because it is a really exciting project, because we're talking about the NBI building, the National Breast Imaging Academy. And in fact, just before we talk about it, let's have a look at an artist's impression of what it will look like. There we are, right beside the Nightingale Centre. It all looks very impressive. Now, remind us what the purpose of this new building is, why we need it.
A few minutes ago, I was talking to you about our belief in screening as being an important component of early diagnosis and preventing breast cancer, and also about our vision for the future of breast screening, screening younger women, screening much more smartly. But for that vision of breast screening to continue for the next decade and beyond, we need the people on the ground to deliver it, and there is a national shortage. So what we hope to do is to have a national resource based here in Manchester, but to benefit the whole country, which will train individuals to run the screening program and to run diagnostic breast clinics and to treat breast cancer. And that starts at the top, as it were, with training the top consultants, but it goes all the way down to training apprentices. This is how you do a mammogram, and everything in between, so that we can really make the screening program tick and function well in the decades ahead.
So that's just really for teaching and training. I mean, will people actually go there for breast screening?
The training has already begun online. So we have got a fantastic online resource that people can sign up to and get trained online. But you can't train someone to do a mammogram without physically coming to a building and interacting with a person, putting them into a mammogram machine, etc., etc. Nor can you learn how to do a biopsy nicely, safely, painlessly, unless you physically come to a building and have some hands-on experience. So yes, it's great to have the online material already up and running, but we do need a building where we can train people with the practical human skills that are needed to do these things well.
Well, that building we saw the artist's impression of can't be built without the money. So where are we with that? How much has been raised? How much do we need to raise before building can actually start?
The build is going to cost £3.5 million. We hope that we'll have 1 million by the end of the year, and that's through our contacts with various trusts and foundations, etc. But we're about to start another exciting collaboration with the NHS. So just as the Nightingale Centre was a collaboration with the NHS, so is the National Breast Imaging Academy. So we're hoping that in our partnership with Manchester NHS Foundation Trust, to have a joint fundraising programme between their charity, our charity, going out to politicians, going out to big donors, going out to companies, etc. We're hoping to create some publicity, get other people to catch this vision of the importance of training in the next generation of breast cancer specialists, and then raise the remaining £2.5 million.
Right. We're coming virtually to the end now, but there's a couple of things I want to do. I've just been handed people ringing in with questions, actually. So I'm going to hold fire for those for a minute to the end, and then I'll throw them at you and see what you think of them and whether you can answer what some people want to know the answers to. But at this stage, I want to talk about the one thing you don't want to talk about. Your MBE, right? You're a modest man. You don't like talking about it, but we're going to. And I don't think there's probably a single person who has any connection with you and the wonderful work that you do and the effort you put into and being the driving force behind Prevent Breast Cancer and all it's achieved that doesn't think that this honour is so merited and so well earned. So how did you first hear that you were getting this award?
It came as a surprise email.
Oh, an email, not a letter these days with a royal stamp.
It started with an email. And the email says, you have been nominated for, but before we actually go ahead with this award, we want to know, would you accept it? So I think this is because they've had famous people in the past turning them down in great publicity. I turned down my award for, Bob Geldof.
I turned down 7 awards in a night, but I might as well tell you now. Not true.
So I then had to think, do I want to do this, yes or no? But responded positively. And then I get a nice letter saying that on such and such a date, your name will be in the newspapers, such and such a Saturday morning. Please don't tell anybody until then.
And did you?
I didn't know. So that on that Saturday, I had several people then texting, WhatsApping, saying, oh, your name's in the newspaper. You've been awarded an MBE. Well done. But until then, it was a complete secret. I
mean, just fantastic that you got this, but you haven't actually got it yet because of COVID and so on. It's all been put back a bit. So what are the details with that? When are you going to get it pinned on you? And do you know who's going to pin it on you and where it will be?
Well, the next email said, I'm very sorry, but there is a huge backlog. The Queen has 18 months of lockdown backlog to get through, and we don't know when or where, but we think it will be 2022. And you'll have an invitation to Buckingham Palace. There'll be 2 of you, but there's no guarantee who it will be. So it might be the Queen, it might be Charles and Camilla, it might be Prince Andrew. I don't know who it will be.
I know who it won't be, but maybe I shouldn't mention that, which prince it won't be, but there we are. Well, we'll all look forward to that and seeing the picture of it being pinned on you.
Thank you.
Now, there's one key person, of course, who's instrumental in putting your name forward to the authorities for an award, someone who had huge admiration for all that you were doing, particularly with the prevent side of it, and felt it was high time you got this honour, and she got the ball rolling and indeed wrote the major letter asking them to give you this honour. and she is Sally Humphreys, whose family have been heavily impacted by breast cancer. And just for a couple of minutes, she's going to join us now from our home. Hello, Sally. Good evening to you.
Hello.
Good. Well, welcome to this. I said there that your family had been heavily impacted by breast cancer. Just take us through, before I get you to talk about this man beside me, just take us through what happened to your family.
Well, my husband's mother died in her 40s, and when my sister-in-law was in her late 30s, she found she had breast cancer, and she was tested and shown to have a BRCA gene. So my husband was tested also, and he has the BRCA gene too, and it's affected my children as well.
Tell us about your children. You've 4 daughters, haven't you?
We do, yes.
Including triplets?
Yes.
Right, so you had all of them tested, and what was the outcome?
They all have the gene.
Right, so when you were told that, what happened then? What decisions were taken?
Well, it was decided that surgery was the best option. And just very proud of very brave girls.
When you say surgery was the best option, I'm right in saying, am I not, that all 4 had double mastectomies?
Yes.
But they're now, like going to actual ages, all in the sort of 40-ish age group, I believe. Have any of them had daughters?
One has a daughter.
Right, so you've got 1 granddaughter. And I'm just going to move to Lester here for a second, because I don't want you to answer this, because this is something you decide in your family. But in that situation, at what stage would you want to check if this gene you don't want to have is there that has run through the family? When would you want to do that? At what age?
The rule is that we won't do it before she's 18. This has to be a decision made by her personally, knowing the pros and cons. It's too big a burden to carry as a teenager through your life. Mm-hmm. So a minimum of 18.
Right. So back to you, Sally. Because I'm going to move on here to Lester, because at that stage you weren't really involved with Prevent Breast Cancer. So what happened, first of all, that got you involved with breast cancer, and then got you so inspired by this man, Lester?
Looking around for a way to help, really, and knowing that for us the most important word was prevent. Because, as it was said before, prevention is better than cure. And I came across Genesis. Yes, that was what I wanted to support.
But I mean, you actually got inspired by the man, because I think, am I not right in saying that you decided to raise funds and you had this barbecue with friends and family? And I think you invited Lester to come to that. Tell me the story of that.
Well, Lester came along to the barbecue, and I don't think anyone knew really what had hit them. His enthusiasm really just sort of raised everybody's, just everything about it. And people gave very generously.
What was it? Because I think you've had several of those. And how much have you raised?
Oh gosh, about nearly 10,000, I think.
Oh, that's incredible.
Or over that.
I mean, to get to that stage, because you haven't been able to hold them recently with COVID, of course, and 10,000 is an awful lot of money. And either you've got very, very generous family and friends, or you've got lots and lots of them, a very big garden and about 4 barbecues.
It's a team effort, like everything, like most things that are good, that's a team effort.
So tell me about the process now. You were absolutely inspired by Lester, and you thought it was high time, as did all of us, but you took the action that he should have an honour. So what was the process? How did you go about that?
Well, it's not easy. I think it should be a lot easier. I couldn't have done it without complete support from his team at Prevent because of the information that's required. And they coordinated all manner of things about the form filling, and they had various ways really of getting the information that we needed to put on the form.
So what happened? You actually wrote the big letter, didn't you, saying why he should get this honour?
Yes, yes.
Well, it obviously inspired them all, because in due course, the announcement came, as you heard from Lester, that he had got this honour. What was your feeling when you heard that?
I was so delighted, absolutely delighted. He is the kind of person that I want to receive an honour. You know, this is not his day job. He has a challenging day job. This is what he does in his spare time. Yeah. And it's remarkable over so many years.
And I like that phrase you used. He's the sort of person I want to see get an honour, because that's so important, because you see so many of these honours and you wonder why on earth they're getting them. But here is somebody who genuinely put in the massive time, effort, his spare time, everything to achieve what he has done. MBE is the least they could do. Have you ambitions for anything greater for him?
I'll have to talk to the team at the office.
Yeah, I think Sir Lester Barr sounds good. Sounds right, doesn't it?
Yes.
Listen, Sally, that's been fascinating throughout, and love to all your family. Glad everything's gone well with them and all your lovely grandchildren. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Now, well, that's virtually it. We're coming to the end of it here. But there are people, I mean, we heard about the fundraising there. Virtually £10,000 she raised with barbecues and so on. And as we've seen before, fundraising is so important for all these research programs. And we've got some other people that we would like to thank because they've made such contributions that their names will go up on those big boards in the reception of Nightingale Centre. Let's have a look at them now. There we are. There's a whole range there on the screen. What are your thoughts about them? Because it's so important to get this money in.
Well, most of the money comes from ordinary people and community groups, and there's no huge corporations. We don't have Apple and Amazon and Google supporting us. We haven't got the government pouring in millions of pounds. Most of our money comes from ordinary folk, and I am just as grateful to you know, the small fundraiser who hasn't got very much, who gives what he or she can to the rich person who gives of their abundance. You know, I'm just so grateful to everyone.
True. Well, those names we just looked at will shortly be up on the big boards at the Nightingale Centre in the reception area there. This is the point where I'm supposed to wind up the programme and say goodbye.
Okay.
And we've been on for a long time, and people may want to go and put the kettle on or watch something on the telly, but don't, just for one more minute, because we've got these questions in which I've just been glancing at, and I think we should get them answered for people. Fairly briefly, if you would, because we've done a long stint. But here they go. Somebody's sent in this question. Would future screening for women under 50 be done using mammograms?
At the moment, we think that mammography is probably the best tool we have. We think it would probably start with a single low-dose mammogram, but there are other technologies coming through, such as whole breast ultrasound. Magnetic scanning is another option, although it doesn't involve an injection. So I think it's a matter of watch this space. So at the moment, our best technology is modern, relatively low-dose digital mammography, but I think that will change.
Right, another lady sends this one in. She says, I had breast cancer, as did my mother. My grandmother had ovarian cancer, and her sister had breast cancer. What would be the best course of action for my slim, fit 29-year-old daughter to follow?
Well, at 29, she can put in place lifestyle practices that will stay with her forever. And that is practical things around not eating processed food, healthy diet, plant-based food, lots of exercise. But at some point, it might be worth her considering having a gene test. And
how does she go about that?
Well, I don't know where she lives, but each big city or each large town and city has a genetics team within it, a family history clinic for women who've got breast cancer in the family, and her GP should be able to send her along for a gene test. Some clinics might not see her until she's a little bit older, but I think it's certainly worth asking the question. And if it was my daughter or granddaughter, I think, yes, I'd be interested in that sort of conversation, which might include gene testing. Okay,
two more, briefly. We hear of more and more women being diagnosed. We hear about this in the media. Is it more common now than before, and if so, why?
It's interesting to look at how breast cancer has slowly been rising in all age groups. And there isn't a single reason, because the causes of breast cancer are not just one thing. It's not like smoking and breast cancer, smoking and lung cancer. So there are multiple factors that seem to be driving it up. And it's not just about better diagnosis, it genuinely is going up. And we think that some of the biggest factors are indeed around diet and lifestyle. As young women are drinking much more alcohol than their parents' generation did, or indeed their grandparents' generation, so that's one factor. Poor diet, being overweight, not enough exercise. These seem to be the big drivers. Plus, there have been social changes, so contraceptive pill, not having your first child until you're much older, not breastfeeding. All of these things seem to be driving it up. But the good news is that we are beginning to see a bit of a plateau, and particularly in the older age group, and maybe this is something, well, this is something that we want to drive down.
The last question is very appropriate, and we didn't put it in. This is a genuine question. It says, what inspires you, Lester, to keep the charity going after all these years? That's a good question to end on.
That's a good question to end on. I guess a couple of things. One is it's the women I see week by week, particularly when a young woman comes forward with a breast cancer diagnosis and they've got young kids at home. It just doesn't seem right. You know, like in that little video we watched, this isn't okay. You know, so that's definitely an inspiration. And I think over the years there've been, you know, there are role models who've been before me, so you know, I am inspired by other people. I've just been watching a box set called The Chosen, and if you want to watch that box set, you'll be inspired as well. And so those are the kind of things that drive me.
And we're all genuinely grateful that you are driven and you do the work that you do. And that just about wraps it up for this evening. It's been fascinating all the way through. Certainly I thought so. I hope you do too. Just before we go, thanking you obviously for watching, I just want to also say another big thank you to Keytech for providing us with this just fabulous facility here in Broadheath near Altrincham, all totally free of charge, and complete with a big screen behind us, the green screen, to put up the pictures and the graphics, and the 2 or 3 cameras we've got to make it a much more polished and professional performance show, call it what you like. I hope you thought that it was too, and we really do appreciate such a generous gesture by them. So it just remains for me to say a huge thank you to you, Lester, for steering us through a fabulous 25 years. And let's hope they are doing another one where they're wondering what happened to breast cancer in 25 years from now, in the 50th anniversary of Prevent Breast Cancer. And if they are,
we'll wind it up.
And they take this as a clip to put it out. I sadly won't be around in another 25 years' time. Lester may well be, but I won't. So people in 2050, hello, I hope you appreciate all that people did before that. Okay, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lester. Congratulations on the MBE. Thank you once again at home. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and found it inspirational too, all that Lester said. Take care. Very good night to you. Bye-bye.